Hey, welcome back. Today we're talking about player development and all the things that kind of go under that umbrella to make you a better player and things you should consider to help you develop into that full potential player that you want to be. Let's go. All right, so player development is kind of one of those terms that gets overused or is used a lot, and people kind of don't understand what it means, or it has a bunch of different meanings depending on who you're talking to and where you're at. So I want to break it down so that that term is kind of understood, where you can use it to your benefit and understand the pieces that go into that to become the player you truly want to be. So my definition of player development is understanding the final product of the player you're going to be, and then all those pieces that lead up to what that player actually looks like at the end. So if you are a high-end caliber college player and that's the best you're ever going to be, then what are those steps to get you to from where you are up to where you end up wanting to be? There are a couple components that I want to cover in this video that kind of lead up to that. The first one is communication, so just simply being able to talk and understand all the components together. So that means that you are able to take the running, the throwing, the lifting, and all those things and work them together so you get better in one thing's not pulling you worse or out of the trajectory you want to be on. Terminology, making sure you can speak the language with the physical therapist or athletic trainers or coaches to really optimize, to kind of standardize that language. Education, making sure you're always learning and moving forward. And then learning the tech and the things that are available to you to set a baseline and make it as objective as you can moving forward. And so you can kind of really build off of, this is where I was a couple months ago and this is how I've improved. All right, so the first piece is communication, and it's simply being able to talk with the coach that you chose. So that coach needs to be able to explain things in a way that you understand. So as a baseball player, our time as athletes, our time is very limited to the time we have to improve and continue to improve to make those jumps to the next level. So when you're practicing, it needs to be that the coach can explain things in a way that you understand right then and there. And if they don't, then you can ask a question and then they figure out a different way to explain it to you so it makes sense. And that way you're kind of optimizing your time to be able to continue to improve at a quick rate to be able to make those jumps into the next level. As a player, it's certainly very, very important to be able to have that person explain it to you in a way that makes sense, whether it's just cues or just different ways that helps click in your brain. But the coaches need to be able to do that. And if they can't do that, you need to find a different coach, because you're wasting the time and valuable time that you have to get better. All right, so the next piece of player development is all the components together. So what that means is you want everything that you do as an athlete to push you in the direction that you want to go. You don't want things that are either not helping you at all, or even worse, taking you backwards away from your goal, while other things are pulling you in different directions. You want that one big push in the same direction, and you want it to be as perfect as you can all the way through. And it's not going to be perfect, but if you keep these things in mind, maybe it'll be more perfect where you'll continue to make those big strides. So a couple of those components are your throwing. So as a pitcher, you're throwing or hitting, the actual skill of baseball, your eating, your recovery, your strength, so that's the weight room, your mobility, so just simply being able to continue to move, balance, the athleticism component of the strength and conditioning. Arm conditioning, making sure, especially as a pitcher, you're in shape to throw the amount of pitches and what type of pitches that you need to be able to throw during the game. Lungs conditioning, so you're able to simply be able to play a full game. So if you're not in playing shape, then you're not doing yourself any service. Sleep and personal education, just making sure you're learning. So you want all of those components and probably a few more that make up your day as an athlete to be pushing towards the end goal of what you want to achieve. Okay, so the third component is terminology. So a part of this communication piece that we mentioned earlier, the terminology, you need to be able to speak the language of the sport that you're playing. So in baseball, or as a pitcher, if you're talking with a coach and we're talking about Z-break and you have no idea what that is, then that conversation doesn't mean anything to you. And likewise with your athletic trainer, if something hurts, being able to identify a specific muscle or region and to be able to talk about it in an intellectual way where it's a lot more precise on what you're talking about, you're going to get a lot more out of that session than maybe you're just like, hey, like this hurts. And that's kind of all the information that you have. You aren't able to talk about the difference between aching, sharp pain, dull pain, regional pain, pinpoint, and how long it's been going. If you don't have all that information and aren't able to describe it and talk about it, you may not get the treatment or things that you need. So similarly in your training, that all kind of comes together as well, right? You're on the bullpen mound and you're talking to your coach about something, and if you're not able to accurately describe in the words that you need to describe, then that training, you're not going to get what you can out of that session. So building off that idea, your job is to learn the language of your sport. So making sure that you can identify and discuss all the different components and what they are. It's not just, oh, my shoulder hurts. No, it's my anterior deltoid. It's the front of my shoulder. So it's making sure you're specific. One piece of player development that really kind of gets overlooked or people don't really think about is just simply the education of it. You need to be hungry for the knowledge to continue to get better. If you don't know what you're looking at or can't evaluate yourself, when you get to the higher levels, you get less coaching. So you need to be able to take a look at video and identify what you want to do and where you want to go and that side of it. You have to kind of become your own coach. So that education is super, super valuable. So amateur players don't really ask those questions that they need to. High school guys are beginning to get to that skill level where they're becoming talented, and you kind of really identify those guys that are going to be good and have the potential to be good. But if they don't ask the questions and do their own research and find out the information that they want to learn kind of as a player and as an individual player, that goes into kind of learning yourself, then you start missing out on that growth aspect of it. All right, and the last phase of player development is technology. And this is something that is absolutely wonderful and it should be 100% used, but it's also something that if you use too much of it, it can be detrimental. So finding that perfect balance for you where you can use it to continue to grow, but it doesn't take over and away from that competing aspect of playing sports. So keeping tech in mind, and the communication piece and the terminology piece, making sure that you can identify and use the technology for your benefit. So you're going to get all these numbers and all these things and baselines and numbers just thrown at you, and sometimes it's a lot, and sometimes the numbers don't mean anything or aren't valuable to what you're working on, and sometimes you need to kind of extrapolate and add, subtract, and work the numbers so that they can make sense and you can apply them to what you're trying to do. So making sure you're able to do all that and understand what you're looking at to then be able to continue to grow using that data. So as an example is, as a pitcher, maybe you are working on a slider and you're throwing the slider. So you get all this data from TrackMan. And if you don't know how each piece influences the other piece, it's going to be really difficult to use that to throw a better slider or to create a good pitch. Maybe your understanding of the airflow over the ball is going to influence how the axis orientation is, and the velocity and the spin rate, and how that ball actually creates that movement in space. So if you are only looking at, the X and Z axis is the only thing that I'm looking at to create that horizontal movement, but you don't necessarily know why because of all those factors that go into it, then you're not going to be able to really figure out why that slider is what it is, or how to make that slider better than what it is. So being able to understand the tech and take the pieces that you need and kind of discard the pieces that you don't need, and use it to continue to be better. Okay, so those are all the pieces of player development that I feel that are super important. And there may be others, but it's important to have good people around you, have the confidence and the drive and the hunger to continue to get better, and have the confidence to continue to ask questions and learn. You're never going to figure it out if you don't ask questions, and as a coach, it's really hard to kind of guess what that player's thinking about. And they have an idea, of course, but the specifics of it or how you're thinking about it also matters. So making sure you're having the communication, speaking in the way that you can, and using all the information to your benefit and to really push you into being that great player that you want to be. So if you have questions or want to learn more about individual pieces, comment below, and I'll respond, or even make another video kind of outlining or explaining those pieces. So let me know. Likes and subscribes and things like that will help me kind of identify what information you guys like to see. So that'll be great. I'll see you guys.